You noble diggers, all stand up now.
Welcome, comrade. Never forget the forms.
Hello my friends, and welcome to my channel. Today we will be talking about the entire history of Western philosophy, the second interlude. Today we're transitioning from Kant to Hegel, and I said that we would be doing Kojève as our transition to Hegel. And this is because Hegel's complicated. Hegel's is as complicated as it gets, in my opinion. That even though Marx is more correct, and that it's as complicated from then on, that it doesn't let up in Husserl or Derrida or Deleuze and Guattari, and in fact it may even uh, be more artful, but it's less verbose, less grandiose in its niaiserie, to borrow a term from Nietzsche. But anyways, we're going to be talking about Kojève today because, as I said, Kojève is the one who managed to teach the French what Hegel was on about, and the French hadn't yet figured out what Kant was on about. And so that's quite the accomplishment. And yeah, he's a 20s philosopher. He taught all the big French philosophers from the 20th century, Lacan, Derrida, everyone was taught by Kojève. Hegel is always broken down to beginners as thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And this is actually a great way to just think about what Hegel is on about, right? But it's actually from Kant, right? The terms thesis, antithesis, and synthesis are not just in Kant, but in a table in Kant, right? He set them up as like a little graphic, and so they're not his terms, right? And but on the other hand, a lot of people will say that unrightfully that if you use the terms thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis to describe what Hegel is about, then you're an idiot or something like that. I don't think that's correct. I think it's more indicative that you're an introductory learner or something like that, but it's not wrong, right? That's the problem, right? It's this is the same thing as Plato and Aristotle, right? Not Socrates and Plato. This is that'll be the relationship between Marx and Hegel, but the relationship between Kant and Hegel is someone who sees something he thinks is cool, right? A systematization, what Plato's done with the forms. Aristotle thinks that's cool. He thinks everything that Plato does is cool, as does Hegel with Kant. But he thinks it can be done better, right? He thinks it can be done more precisely, right? Oh, I just got to stop saying right in these videos. Um, he thinks that the entanglement of spirit and reality is more complex than Kant gives it credit for. Synthetic a prioris are the system, I'm just parroting Nietzsche again here. It is the sense by which you have the possibility for a rational understanding of the world, for reason to be the driving force of the world, right? Damn it, I said right again. But the synthetic a priori is not enough for Hegel. The way that spirit is entangled, enmeshed in reality, the way that they play off one another is much more intricate to his eyes. And so when you use thesis, antithesis, synthesis, most people think about history. And that's not quite correct. That the philosophy of spirit is a complete system, that it's the whole thing the whole way up, that the same processes that you could probably point to in history that Hegel points to, right? That but those are the same processes happening inside a human, but with the caveat, right? The understanding that what he's trying to do is still sacralize the whole thing, to make free will true. And free will is kind of, hard to even define at this point because of the way that spirit is enmeshed with reality. But there are choices, at least, still, right? Man is self-consciousness. He is conscious of himself, conscious of human reality and dignity, and it is in this that he is essentially different from animals, which do not go beyond the level of simple sentiment of self. Man becomes conscious of himself at the moment for the first time he says, I. To understand man by understanding his origin is, therefore, to understand the origin of the I revealed by speech. In the passage where Hegel spoke of the circularity of the system, it was said that in coming to the end of the logic, one is brought around to its beginning, and having effected this circular movement, one sees the necessity of going beyond it, that is, of going to the phenomenology. To proceed from the logic to the phenomenology is to proceed from the identity or perfect coincidence of the subject and the object of the concept and reality, of Bewusstsein and Selbewusstsein, to their opposition or difference, Unterschied, as Hegel says. Now, the distinction between external consciousness and self-consciousness, which characterizes the phenomenology, presupposes a real difference between consciousness in general and the non-conscious reality, or if you please, a real distinction between man and the world. Consequently, a system that breaks up into two parts, namely a logic and a phenomenology, must necessarily be realist, as we say. This fact is decisive for understanding Hegel. For, deceived by the Hegelian expression absolute idealism, absolute Idealismus, people have often asserted that Hegel's system is idealist. Now, in fact, Hegelian absolute idealism has nothing to do with what is ordinarily called idealism, and if terms are used in their usual senses, it must be said that Hegel's system is realist. To convince oneself of this, one need only cite several texts found in the essay of his youth, Difference Between Fichte and Schelling's Systems. In it, for example, Hegel says the following: neither the subjective by itself nor the objective by itself fills up consciousness. The pure subjective is just as much as an abstraction as the pure objective. It is in view of the identity of the subject and the object that I posit things outside of me with as much subjective certainty as I posit myself. Things exist just as subjectively certainly as I myself exist. One finds in both, namely in the subject and the object, not only the same right to existence, but also the same necessity. For if only one had the related to the absolute and the other not their essential reality, would then be supposed unequally, and the union of the two would therefore be impossible. Also impossible, consequently, the task of philosophy, the aim of which is precisely to overcome dialectically the division or opposition of the subject and the object. You see what happened there, I hope? I doubt, though. He has called our dichotomy false. How dare he? He's wrong. But this is what he's done. He says that we who call Hegel idealist are incorrect, that he's a realist. But what we said was that there's either materialism or idealism. Either material directs reality or thought directs reality. This realist thing is a middle of the road. And yes, realism is a soft idealism. It is a compatibilist idealism with reality. But the point, the thing you got to remember is that the idealism predominates. If we're viewing it like a parliament, right, and there's the idealist party and the materialist party, they may both have lots of seats in government in the Hegel system, but the idealist party prevails, forms the government. And it is exactly this relationship that Marx will turn on his head. But before we get there, we'll do a little more Hegel. We'll do some reading of Hegel and get this point across about how reality and the soul interconnect. Thank you. Have a nice day. Hello, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you. This channel has one mission: to prevent civilizational collapse associated with climate change, to prevent 100 million refugees by 2035, to stop 7 billion from starving to death by 2075. And we will do this through one main vehicle. We mean to unite the Anglosphere. We will do this by convincing the Commonwealth of His Majesty King Charles III to apply for statehood as one. And then with this new power, we will be able to negotiate in good faith with the rest of the world on how to tackle this crisis. Thank you and enjoy.